Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome, welcome. It's been a while, but welcome back to another edition of Fake Accents Unite. I'm joined, of course, by my co-host on the microphone, the Britisher. Good evening, sir.
Good evening to you, and good evening to the proletariat out there.
Well, you're not exactly doing a good job of convincing people that you're not a communist now, are you, Britisher?
Well, you see, I thought I would, given that I never mentioned the Romans, I would address them in the form of the lowliest class of plebeians, which are the proletarians.
You're a monster.
That's where the word actually comes from.
I would never have addressed the audience.
Oh no, you would. You would obviously never have done that, would he, Owain? He would never have done that.
No, never.
No, we can agree on that.
I have a great deal of respect for my own audience.
He's a gracious leader. He's a gracious leader.
Gracious, humble, modest, some might say.
Not at all hubristic. Yes, yeah.
Yeah, that's all. In fact, I am much more humble than thou. Humbler than thou.
No, this is complete nonsense. Of the three of us, I am clearly the humblest of the lot of us.
Oh, yeah, totally.
Good evening to Owain as well, who joins us from the Welsh, the place of the Welsh.
Shemai, my fellow plebeians, I join you. I am the new friend of the working man.
The new... After AA has decided that he's no longer the friend of the working man.
I'm picking up the moniker.
I see.
You're friend of the working Welshman.
You're shamelessly stealing his catchphrase. Is that what it is?
No, someone had to.
I've got.
It's been.
Yeah. We've got several new folks in the chat. It is good to see the regulars as well. Thank you, and thank you for turning up. The fairly new people who I assume are here from my stream with Charlemagne on was it Saturday or Sunday? I think it was Saturday, where we talked through the academic agent's positive vision. Did you catch up with this, Britisher? Have you been following the drama surrounding that particular incident?
I have absolutely no idea what you are talking about, and thank God I don't.
Yes, you're quite...
Sounds painful.
You're quite better off. He essentially laid out his technophobic vision of a utopian British village from 1986. So, and that's what he wants us to return to. Although,
you know what he is? Right, he is... his vision is essentially Wales.
Do you know what? I was looking at various towns with possibility of purchasing one, and they are all in Wales. There are no if you want to buy a town, they're all in Wales.
I did see your tweet that you thought you could. You were basically talking in the pluralis majestatis. You were using the royal we. The royal pronoun, and suggesting that we could do this. We could purchase a town. And I was just looking at this, going, "Oh, this seems strange. I'll just stay out of this."
But in many ways, he is literally he's just projecting Wales upon the world.
Okay.
Very much in terms of his upbringing. I don't want this entire stream to be about the academic agent's foibles.
Ridiculously long place names, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Too many L's.
It needs one with a really deep meaning. Every place name needs one with a deep meaning. Like, in England, what have you got? What's that typical English place name?
Well, I mean, given that you're Welsh, you would no doubt think that Swineford or something like that would be a typically English name.
Yeah, it's a bit boring. Like, you need something like... Our names have, a really long meaning. So, Llan means church founded upon. So, we literally have a place called Llan Sadon, which means church founded on a Saturday, but it sounds way better in Welsh.
Not so obvious. Do you believe that Llan is church founded upon? It's just a little short to carry that much meaning.
It sounds like a complete and utter cope to me, Britisher. I don't trust that the Welsh have any culture whatsoever. and certainly not a culture that they haven't stolen from the sheep which they farm.
Well, I mean, they stole it. They stole it during the imperial times, in the Bronze Age, when their empire covered half the world.
Of course, half the known world at that point, which would have been half their own mountain.
I don't think NSO knows about this.
Oh, go on.
So have you So me and Britisher have a little thing going on right now. Because
are you a couple? It's so nice. It's so nice for you to have come out of the closet.
Not so obvious. Be a good boy, be still, and listen to the theory of Uncle Owain.
I've basically got a massive amateur historian. I love history, and I'm kind of this dream of being Indiana Jones. So I have a theory. I think it is very possible that there was a Bronze Age empire akin to those in the Mediterranean on the Western Atlantic coast, and so Britisher has, as Britisher does, basically amalgamated it with my insane kind of non-stop talkingness for Wales. Yeah, that's the word. And so he thinks now that I am trying to tell the world that there is this ancient Bronze Age Welsh empire that spanned the Atlantic.
Yes, you actually discovered America first. Is that not true?
No, but I'm just saying, I think there is something going on in Britain
in
the Bronze Age.
What do you mean, discovered? America isn't actually a continent. It's just sort of the residue left behind by the Welsh from extracting that much in their mines.
Okay, look, the largest copper mine in northern Europe was in North Wales during the Bronze Age. So therefore, I'm just saying.
The largest copper mine.
Why do I have in my head now like this glorious image of the Britisher. I have this glorious image in my head that the Welsh mined out an awful lot of copper, built copper bathtubs, and then rowed across the Atlantic in them to colonise the New World.
Yeah, this makes perfect sense. Yes,
this is what happened.
Just
but it's a just to say, it's the Great Orme Mine. If you want to look it up.
You see, that's what the green in the Welsh flag is. It's the oxidised copper bathtub.
Now, someone's calling Anglesey Atlantis, right? Now,
yeah.
Here's another part of the theory. So, think about this, right? Think if the ancient Egyptians traded with this empire in the British Isles, and over time, once they lost contact with the British Isles after the Bronze Age collapse, they thought that it was just kind of a vague knowledge of this island in the Atlantic, and then they were called the people of the Atlantic. So thus, Atlanteans and Atlantis land in the Atlantic, and thus it came to Plato through an Egyptian trader, no less, and he then interpreted it and added his own spin to it, and thus you get the myth of Atlantis.
Thus, so Atlantis, the British are eternal.
Yeah, so you see, Camelot and Atlantis, same thing.
Yeah, yes.
Somebody appears
no joke.
Somebody appears to be sort of falling asleep on their keyboard in the comments. Could you interpret that, Owain?
Yng dwi'n byw yng Nghymru hefyd. I live in Wales as well. Dwi'n byw yng Nghymru hefyd. He's actually doing treiglo properly. That means
is actually the proximity to the Welsh the reason the Liverpudlians say Leich?
Yes, so Liverpudlian accent is actually a mix of Irish and Welsh.
Amazing.
So if you go to North Wales, when you're from North Wales, they all speak very Liverpudlian, but they don't.
Well, yes, but quite. That sound doesn't exist anywhere else in Britain, really.
Yeah, it's a GOG thing. It's what North Walian thing, because the GOG. If you talk to a Welsh speaker, if I see a Northern Welsh speaker, they are literally talking in phlegm. So they're talking Welsh in a Scouse accent.
So it's basically the Welsh have the GOG thing, and the Scots have the ZOG thing. Because they had the letter ZOG, didn't they? Which by now is pretty much sort of, fallen out of usage. Which is why they end up spelling Menzies, but pronouncing it Mingis.
Yeah. So in North Wales,
GOG and ZOG, there is clearly something going on here. So if the Irish have, I don't know, a trog or something like that, then we've got the whole Celtic lineage complete.
Yeah. So North Wales is a very interesting thing in the fact that in the North Wales, the Welsh word for now is nawr, and the Welsh word, but the North Walian word for nawr is rhuan, which is the same word but backwards.
Is that what? Say that again.
Yeah. So nawr, N-A-W-R, means now in Welsh.
Okay.
Repeat after me, not so obvious. This all makes complete sense.
Okay.
And in North Wales, they say rhuan, which is the same word but spelt backwards.
And it also means now.
And it also means now, but that's what they say for now.
Was this just like some kind of family feud where they just two people decided we hate each other, and therefore I say this word this way and you go, I hate the way you say that word, I'm going to say it the opposite way around, but it'll have the same meaning.
Yeah, so it's interesting because in North Wales as well, if you go to certain areas, they will refuse to call Cardiff the capital because they prefer Liverpool. So
imagine preferring Liverpool.
You see, ladies and gentlemen, for anybody who's not British, for any Americans out there listening, maybe now you're beginning to see where we get our surreal sense of humour from.
It's because we're quite a surreal people in general.
Yeah, we are.
Yes.
We can have a country as small as Wales,
and we have the Welsh in our midst.
Yeah, having a complete divide, and then you have Aberystwyth in the middle.
They are among us.
That's so weird.
Everywhere I go, I see them.
This ancient Welsh copper empire that dominated Egypt from afar, was it brought low by global warming?
So
now,
what happened?
Not so obvious. That was a fantastic segue.
Yes, but you ruined it by mentioning that it was a fantastic segue, and then causing this little diatribe in the middle here.
I need to write my thesis on this, by the way, so I will one day.
I
did that.
Genuinely am excited to read that when it does eventually come to paperback. Owain. So yes, do crack on with that.
I'll be on Rogue in no time.
We do have, of course, today a little bit of a theme for the episode. The theme is the climate catastrophe. Did you like that in terms of dramatic tension building?
There was clearly some reverb missing on that.
Well, I watched what was the film Ed Wood by the Tim Burton film. Do you know it?
Yes.
We watched that the other day, and so very the Dracula vibes are sort of coming. Is that
Bela Lugosi?
Bela Lugosi.
Well,
yes.
It's coming to an end, lads.
So
it's over. It's done. We're done.
We have a story. Let me pop this up so that we can actually see it, and including everyone. I hope that everybody enjoys the new background, by the way. This is the very hard work of Owain after we received several complaints that the last background was too bright for people, especially later in the evening, and people also wanted to be able to read their comments on the screen a bit better, so we went for a bit of a darker theme this time, and I'd like to say he's done a fantastic job, so thank you very much, Owain.
No problem, sir. Always a pleasure to make stuff.
So, where's this here? Yes, IPCC report, or also called, if I turn off this slide viewer, and it's going to take up half the screen, but that's okay. So it says it's code red for humanity. The IPCC, by the way, is basically the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, and their entire job is advising the UN on different things to do with climate change. And we have this Environmental Protection Agency image because there were wildfires, I think in Greece earlier this week. They had to evacuate a load of people from Greek islands because of wildfires. So this is actually a bit of a pain to try and track down again, because the BBC never likes to link to anything, which it does. But we'll give you the gist of the paper. I'm sure you already can sort of tell. So we've got things like human activity is changing the climate in unprecedented and irreversible ways. A major UN scientific report has said the landmark study warns of increasingly extreme heat waves, droughts and flooding, a key temperature limit which is going to be broken in just over a decade, or at least within two. And the UN has said, in the most scientific language possible, the report is a code red for humanity. All the previous reports were only a code blue, you see. Everything now
was Crichton called into help
yes,
in
exactly.
order to change the bulb?
It does involve changing the bulb. I almost made a joke earlier when you were mentioning about the Welsh and their particular peculiarities of language, that they sound a little bit like the Guelph. But
the Guelph sound a little bit like that.
Yes. Well observed.
So
you're so funny, lads.
I can tell how amused you are, Owen. That's what it is. So we have this kind of general. I'm not going to go too much into the media report of it, because we're going to look at the actual report in a moment. In fact, I will just link Owine that directly in the stream chat, because otherwise it's it's not so
for a report.
Useful. We will be going over this in a little bit, but essentially they're very angry. We've got this big graph here with a big upwards trending line. As we know, line up bad when it comes to climate change. And I will point out that for anyone who's new and watching these things, I'm not actually a climate change denier. I'm not opposed in principle to the idea that we are having a dramatic impact on the environment. We should be moving towards more sustainable ways of living, and that actually, creating renewable sources of energy is not is a net positive. This seems to be very much the case. However, there is also an argument to be made for accuracy, and as we will see, there are several things to do with this which, again, frustrate me. In terms of the way it's presented, and Britisher is such a dilettante of statistical methodology will also no doubt be as incensed as I am that this report even is.
Yes, I like to apply that thing that is so alien to you, which is just called common sense.
Common sense. Oh, yes. I think I've heard about that. It was in a scientific paper I read some years ago. It's been debunked now, hasn't it, common sense?
Oh, yes, of course it has, yes.
Fact-checked.
Yes, yeah, I believe the chief debunkers of it were, professors of African and women's studies at American universities.
Yes. So, we've got all these dramatic graphs and all sorts of things, but it's important to note we're going to go through the summary for policymakers, and the reason we have to go through the summary for policymakers is because it is only about 40 pages long. We won't go through all 40 pages, I don't think, because I think just getting the gist of it will be enough. Let me just change this so that it gets us to the point where we can see it properly.
Given that you have this on your screen and I don't, because I when I got this joyous thing, I looked at it for about 5 minutes on my mobile phone and then moved on.
Oh, that was a very poor decision of you.
Yes, but
I'm just amazed that Britisher has a smartphone.
Well, there is that. Well, mine's steam powered. But when it comes to when it comes to this, given that you've got it in front of you and you've got the PDF,
sure.
I wonder if you could do a word search and see how many times a certain word pops up.
What word do you want?
Likely.
Yes, well, there's a very important thing to do with likely in here, which I will make note of before we get going. Basically.
Did I at least touch upon something there that was relevant?
Very relevant.
Okay, yeah, please. Moving on.
Relevant.
Do not look behind the screen door, Britisher.
To pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. Okay, so this report is it's an oversimplification. This is actually a report which is superseding a report which was released in 2018. So it is 3 years and 14,000 papers have been done. Now, this is immediately alarm bells to anyone with any kind of scientific training whatsoever anyway, okay? So this is an amalgamation study. It is not a singular study. It is not something which can be sort of conclusive in any way, because there is no way to differentiate the methods involved. There is no real way. These are all...
It's effectively a meta-analysis.
That is the word, yes. So it is an amalgamation of studies with similar methods, but not the same. These are then using various statistical processes sort of reduced down so that the results can be aggregated, and then this is put into various quote-unquote findings. These are used in science to basically get a good assessment of where the literature is, what the balance is between people supporting something and people who don't support, studies which support and studies which don't. Although, again, it's weakness is that it's compiled by people, and therefore it's easy to miss things, especially if you don't happen to be an expert. And if you do happen to be an expert in that field, you're quite likely to be biased in favour of one conclusion or another. And again, that causes issues with
well, you see, I even once made a video long ago about meta-analysis, and I think it's long since deleted on my channel.
Yes, I think I was around when you made it.
It was effectively a warning to people that meta-analyses tend often to simply be sleight of hand, because there are very many reasons why one might leave a report out, because as NSO just said, the methodology isn't compatible or things like that. But therefore it allows one to leave out a huge amount of stuff that might in fact be relevant, but doesn't agree with one's conclusions prior to one even having made the study.
So there is the omissions issue, but in terms of this, the trouble is that meta-analyses are subject to less scrutiny. They are still peer-reviewed, but less scrutiny, especially when you're dealing with very niche subjects. Meta-analyses fall down because who can peer review it, especially if there's only, potentially 4 or 5 people who are actually doing this. I don't know exactly how large the IPCC committee was that did this, but this report has been compiled in less than 3 years. And so if it's been compiled in less than 3 years, then we have another issue, right? Which is, what's the number? 14,000 divided by 365 times 3, right? So in theory, they are peer reviewing nearly 12 papers a day, assuming that they work 7 days a week and take no holidays. So that's a huge number of papers to be compiling in a single day. Like, assuming that they have, even 12 people on this, or a committee of similar size, because these think tanks are not typically very large groups of people, then I still find it slightly dodgy that you can evaluate and determine the credibility of a paper in less than 24 hours, for every single paper. Right? I just don't see it. And then, of course, to come together with findings and aggregate conclusions, etc., etc. So we've got that issue as well. Okay, so we have the this policy. It's again, I know we're stressing over the kind of minutiae of it a little bit at the moment, and what it is and that sort of thing. But it is really important to understand these things from the point of view of what it can actually tell us. And what it can actually tell us is what percentage of scientists are in favour of particular conclusions according to the authors of the meta-analysis, and it can't really do anything else. The whole point of meta-analyses in the literature is supposed to be to inform, where the gaps in knowledge are, where the falsifiable issues are, and so where future research should be directed. What actually happens is that media companies jump on them as, more studies equals more proof, and therefore it's proof. And we don't like that. We don't like the word proof, especially in terms of meta-analysis. Okay, so there's a piece of small print here on the first page, and it says, each finding is grounded in an evaluation of underlying evidence and agreement. A level of confidence is expressed using 5 qualifiers: very low, low, medium, high, and very high, and typeset in italics. So, for example, medium confidence. The following terms have been used to indicate the assessed likelihood of an outcome or result. Virtually certain means 99 to 100% probability. Very likely is 90 to 100%. Likely is 66 to 100%. About as likely as not is 33 to 66%. Unlikely is 0 to 33%. Very unlikely is 0 to 10%. And exceptionally unlikely is 0 to 1%. So, I hope we can see that we've already got a level of kind of abstraction that makes things difficult to read, and also is not something we really want to care about. That. So, very low, low, medium, high, and very high. I'm going to be. This could go in one of two ways. So you've got for the very low to very high, which is to do with confidence intervals, but then they've also got this probability factor. So I'm going to assign, if they say very high, they mean virtually certain. High is very likely. Medium is going to be likely. So anything which says medium effectively has a chance. Again, they've put these weird overlaps between their categories again. So we have this sort of like virtually certain is 99 to 100%, but very likely is also 90 to 100%. And therefore, I would say that instead that's 90 to 99. Likely is 66 to 100%, but if it was virtually certain or very likely, then they would say one of those other ones. So it's actually 66 to 90%. It's also really important to understand what we call the replicability crisis in all fields of science at the moment, which means that they are using statistical criteria to determine the probability that these are not by chance. I apologise to both Britisher and Owine, whose brains might possibly be melting from the boredom of me explaining this. But essentially,
Are you still talking?
If you have a 95% probability that you know this would be something which falls into the very likely category on this, then the actual chance of that study being replicated, so the idea that you could put in exactly the same statistical data pretty much and it being or the exact same conditions, I should say, and that producing the same results, is about 50% at the moment. So I think you'll find that my derision when it comes to something which claims to be likely, i.e. a confidence interval of around 70%, which means that the chances of it being replicated are orders of magnitude less than the 50% you get at a 95% confidence interval, is warranted. Okay, so now that that's out of the way, we can take a look at the actual report and what they say, and then get on to the interesting bit, which is, of course, what the UN is going to do as a result of this report. Okay.
Can I just second what you said earlier? It's like I do believe there is climate change happening, and I do believe that humans, to some extent, have had an effect on it. But I think that there's still that massive argument to discuss to what extent that is, we need to understand a lot more the idea that we're only looking at, in climate terms, about 100 years of climate. You know, and the fact is that climatic cycles can be thousands of years. So it's very difficult for us, I think, to even judge it still. But
yes, we'll get on to that.
If we have to do these provisos, then I would say that I too have no doubt as such that the climate has been changing, because one only needs to look at the glaciers in the Alps that were perfectly healthy when I was a kid, but are now just basically stone rubble. Yeah. So clearly something has occurred. It would be sort of foolhardy to just basically pretend that it wasn't so. However, my being the mischievous soul that I am, let us assume there wasn't really anything occurring. And let us assume that a committee calling itself the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change would conclude that there wasn't any climate change. What would happen to the panel?
Bye-bye, panel.
Yeah.
It is basically it's turkeys voting for Christmas. We know that doesn't happen. So it is basically built in. There is a built-in bias into the whole thing. Simply, they need to come up with certain findings just for the sake of self-preservation.
Well, yeah,
and this is the same. This is the same for every, climate change correspondent in the media. I mean, if they were to conclude that it's all complete hokum, they're all out of a job, because who needs them?
So there we go. I will take this moment to indicate that our sponsor for this video is the like button, and so if you could smash that button as hard as you physically can, then we'd very much appreciate it.
I thought it was British Petroleum.
BP, yeah, like ExxonMobil has proudly sponsored this
Royal Dutch. Yes, Royal Dutch.
I think not. Okay, so let's take a look at the current state of the climate. Why don't you? Essentially, they say it's unequivocal. Human influence has warmed the atmosphere, ocean, and land. Widespread and rapid changes in the atmosphere, ocean, cryosphere, and biosphere have occurred. I don't think that this is particularly controversial. The arguments to be made are how much and what are we doing about
the simple fact that we have put a gas into the atmosphere which traps warmth would make it fairly impossible to say, well, no, we haven't contributed.
Okay.
But what that contribution actually is, that's where it suddenly all becomes, well, yes.
Indeed.
Yeah, yes, when you consider the kind of how much a volcano, for example, expels compared to a
Yes,
a
I mean, when you basically ask them to forget likely, put a figure on it, that's when suddenly the whole thing falls apart.
So, we have a series of different statements here, which is basically carbon dioxide has gone up. Each of the last 4 decades has been successively warmer than any decade that preceded it since 1850, and so on. Right now, 1850 is this key moment because it's the date around which we have solid data for. It's about 150 years ago. How much data we have is unclear.
Of course, it is also the period at which one might say that the British Industrial Revolution was roughly getting going. I know it's older than that, but where it was actually occurring to any kind of, degree that one would think was putting enough into the atmosphere to actually do anything.
Indeed. So, we have things like the likely range. Again, I will inform you, the likely range, which is with about 70%. I've got about 70% confidence in this, is what they say. The likely range of human-caused global surface temperature increase is about 1.1 degrees. Okay, so that's what they say. They say we're about 70% sure. Given that we know that these things are very, very difficult to replicate, we're about 70% sure that the global temperature increase is about 1.1 degrees. And again, we're about 70% sure that mixed greenhouse gases contributed a warming of this. Other human drivers did produce a cooling effect, which is the aerosols, and primarily through the erosion of the ozone layer. But again, like this idea that they actually have confidence in this is not great, because again we're talking about statistical probability here. We're not talking about their actual confidence levels, and that's very frustrating. We're going to get onto the graphs in a little bit, but I just want to go through a couple of these paragraphs and just mention that's what they're saying. So it's rained more again with medium confidence since 1950. I mean, to me, the idea of taking a 50-year span and then a 70-year span, really, and then claiming that because it rained more, that means anything with great detail. Like, precipitation has likely increased again about 70%. Probability. However, again, as I say, they don't really go into how much by and sort of what the damage of that has been here. Now we get into things which we are more confident on, which is like human influence is very likely, so we're looking at least 90% confidence here. The main driver of the global retreat of glaciers and a decrease in Arctic sea ice. However, for 1979 to 2020, there has been no significant trend in Antarctic sea ice area. So they're like, we're really confident that we are melting ice in the Arctic, but it doesn't seem to be affecting the Antarctic. And this again rubs me the wrong way, because I'm like, it's not like all of the greenhouse gases congregate to the north. North is not actually up in terms of the way we're oriented, and the idea heat isn't all rising to that particular pole, right? So it seems quite strange. But,
I understand precipitation, how we could have increased it, because obviously if you're launching a lot of particulates into the air, into the atmosphere, that allows for droplets to kind of congeal around it, and that's how you create rain clouds, and that's how acid rain and stuff is created more and such. But so it's easier for, say, China pumping out some of the worst quality coal in the world into the air, which will just create tons of rain. So that makes sense. But it's the Arctic ice thing though. You're talking then about how does the heat get there? So you're talking about probably the jet stream, aren't you? Because that goes into the Arctic Circle, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I'm literally going off of an A-level geography qualification here.
So again, don't
quote me.
These things I just want to be presented accurately. That's the whole purpose. So we have this particular graph here, which is about human influence warming the climate. Now, this is possibly the most misrepresentative graph that you could possibly have. I'm just going to try and zoom it in a little bit. On the left panel A here, we have global changes in global surface temperature reconstructed from paleoclimate archives. Okay, so paleoclimate archive. I'll pull up the official definition, just because. No, I don't want to print it. I want to search.
As well, another thing for the ladies and gentlemen, if you type in average global temperature, they'll only show you the temperature from 1880 onwards. Usually, they won't show you any the casting back, because there was a period in the medieval ages which is called the medieval warm period.
Yeah. So they talk about a little bit
warm.
So the paleoclimate archive is essentially geological samples, right? Just to be clear. So they've taken the a big core of rock, and that they've said we can generally chart sort of roughly where we are. So that's the grey line before the black line, and then we have these kind of confidence intervals, and you'll notice there is an awful lot of kind of leeway, especially before this observed data line, that is potentially where things were that we don't know. So again, it's average. This line in the middle here, which goes up and down, it's already quite jagged, could go anywhere within this grey box, they're essentially saying. So I don't have a great deal of confidence in this reconstruction, as it happens anyway. But there is there's a clear spike. Then we take that spiked area, and that becomes panel B, which is a lot less dramatic, I must say, when looked at in its sort of stretched out form from 1850 to 2020. And it's essentially the annually averaged, the black line is the annually averaged global surface temperature, and it's compared to climate model simulations. That's a really important important thing. This isn't an observed temperature. So this is they essentially have generated a line which is what they say the temperature should be, and then they have generated this observed line, and it's deviated from this kind of normal line, as it were.
So the issue here would be that the fact is from 1850 beyond 1850, going back, we don't know. We don't have any accurate data.
Nothing with any great degree of accuracy. No.
So, and even between 1850 and maybe 1950, we still don't have probably the best data to go off of.
I think we've got another cause, therefore, in order to tear down statues of American founding fathers. They let the side down by not taking any accurate temperature readings.
So, and so the issue here is that when they're creating climatic simulation, they're only going off of a very short span of a climatic of an observable climatic cycle, because climate, like I said earlier, a climatic cycle could be thousands of years. So to try and accurately simulate that with only the 150 years of knowledge that we do have, and probably 100 of those years being very, debatable, it's quite ludicrous.
And without the ability to explain past changes.
Well, yes. Like
that medieval warm period you talk about.
Yeah, you got the medieval warm
just
period,
about
Bronze Age.
The differences in regional climates in the ancient period. You look at these things and you just go, okay, so how was it that North Africa was the breadbasket of much of the late Roman Empire? Something clearly has changed. How did Masada hold out against the Romans for ages and ages and ages? It seemed to be that they were able to, have at least some limited food production there. Now you look at Masada, the ruins today, and you just go, they grew something here? Something has changed. Now, explain those changes exactly before you try and then project forward and go, oh, and this is to come. And this is, this is where I sort of look at it and just go, this really seems to be, one is trying to explain systems that are too large for one's own understanding. Precisely because of what Owain says, that this thing operates on cycles that are much too long-lived for us to ever have observed in any clear way. When the cycle comes back around.
It is also something that we can't experiment with because we've only got one Earth, right? So in terms of statistical proofs, you can't prove anything.
We have changes, and basically any change is being attributed to us. Rather than, wouldn't some change in any direction really be expected to be occurring?
So in terms of this report, as far as I can tell, the only findings that I trust from it are the ones which say virtually certain. Just because 99% confidence interval is pretty good. And so I just want to go through these statements, and then we can go on to away from the science, so to speak, and more into how this is going to be implemented worldwide. It is virtually certain that the global upper ocean has warmed since the 1970s. Again, doesn't say how much. It is virtually certain that human-caused CO2 emissions are the main driver of global acidification of the surface open ocean. I don't think that's in doubt either.
I think, again, I would say the biggest issue going forward, in climate change, if you put it there, is probably the damage we are doing to the oceans. I think that there's no doubt. Have you seen the amount of crap we're pumping into it? And the plastics, we're using. I'll agree with them when they say that. I think it's disgusting the amount of. We're basically pumping chemicals out of the ground into the ocean. It's awful.
You've got yes, there are huge issues. It is virtually certain that hot extremes have become more frequent and more intense across most land regions than since the 50s, and it's extremely unlikely that this occurred without human influence. It's virtually certain that the land surface will warm more than the ocean surface, because the ocean's better at diffusing heat than us, and that the Arctic will, because, funnily enough, reflective surfaces pick up heat better than non-reflective surfaces, and it's mainly reflective. Based on multiple lines of evidence, upper ocean stratification open, and then it just basically are summarising the exact same findings here again. and that we're going to continue losing ice, and that the global mean sea level is going to rise as a result. Like, that's the only thing. Again, I'm also excluding things which say very likely to virtually certain. So I'm like, okay, 90 to 99%. Which again, I put at 95% confidence interval for that, which again, 50% replicable. So
another thing about when it comes to ocean temperatures are highly linked to solar cycles, because obviously, you know, if you're in a war, if you're in the middle of the ocean, you're going to be exposed to the sun a lot more in areas. It warms it up. So again, that's another aspect to all this that we just can't comprehend. Really, is the the solar cycle is in millions of years. You know.
Yeah.
So like
they do try and account for solar in these papers, but again, an awful lot of it is based on reconstructions of model data, which we do not have observed readings for. It is impossible to have observed readings for. And in terms of long-term trends, I think it's clear that we are having an impact. But the idea that they claim that this is unheard of, unprecedented for the last 6,500 years, which I think is a bit of a ludicrous statement, just based on the temperature variation that we've seen anyway within, you know, even within their claimed data range at the moment, which is
these are the shortcomings of Herodotus for not having told us about the 0.2 centigrade difference in a particular period.
Well, the last they claim to have essentially got geological samples for the past 2,000 years, and they've reconstructed data from that. But even that essentially has this kind of variation period up to a half degree, and the idea that we've gone up by another half degree on average within the past 70 years is well within the realms of, like, while statistically it's unlikely, like, it's not beyond the realms of possibility.
But the question is also whether any change that does occur, whether it actually does occur at an incremental, gradual level, or whether there is a build-up of something, there is a change, and then it plateaus and just simply, you know, what I'm trying to say is that any change might basically occur quickly and then just settle down and then stay at that level.
Well, we have yet to see what we might call a correction, right? So there's that. Although it's possible that this is a correction. I mean, we all know that the Thames used to freeze, for instance, right, over the winter.
It didn't used to freeze all the time. It only froze in a certain period of time known as the Ice Age, which was a very cold period over the course of maybe about 50 years.
Yeah, they did have a didn't they have a thing where it was like global cooling is the issue at one point?
In the 70s, that was I think the British probably could speak about this better than I could. But
yes, in the 70s. I mean, there are clips of Leonard Nimoy warning us of an oncoming cooling period.
Yeah. And then the ozone layer was the big thing, and then this became the thing.
Yes. Now it's.
There was also other things like acid rain and whatever. You know, there were various other scares that lasted a while.
I have no doubt that, for instance, our erosion of the ozone layer, you know, the hole in the ozone, etc., will have caused damage, and various things that we were pumping, especially in the last.
That was all down to that genius, wasn't it? And perhaps someone in the chat can tell us what his name was. I'm too lazy to now try and, Google it in order to pretend I knew. But it was the same scientist who decided to put lead in petrol.
Right.
And he knew.
Yes.
He knew what he was doing at the time. So he was absolutely, in that case, he was a bit of a rotten egg. He did realise that some workers who had worked on this suffered lead poisoning and whatever, but he went ahead with it nonetheless. And the entire purpose of the lead in the petrol was to stop the knocking in engines. But then, in order to redeem himself, he came up with the sprays that was seen as perfectly clean, and it exchanged something else that prior to that was sort of deemed damaging.
Well, you're talking about
he sort of thought he had absolutely redeemed himself But what he didn't know is that it was absolutely devastating the ozone layer.
Yes, CFCs, chlorofluorocarbons.
And he died, I think he was bedridden at some point, and being this genius, he came up with some sort of device, some kind of crane system. And just like the lead in petrol and the CFCs, he managed to strangle himself with his own sort of crane hoisting system in bed.
Oh, for goodness sake!
So, yeah, all in all, he was clearly one of the greatest minds in society.
He just, this guy, he got all the breaks, didn't he?
Yes, yeah. But then again, I assume he died an extremely rich man.
Well, presumably.
Which once again proves that, of course, all rich people have only ever contributed magnificently to the progress of mankind. And
miserably.
There are no counterexamples.
Never, ever, ever. So, yes, I think there's a deal of skepticism that can be applied to this report, especially with regard to the fact that we know it is a meta-analysis again, and a lot of the data is unreliable. So, there are only sort of 7 or 8 statements in there which are given with any degree of confidence, and most of those are just kind of common knowledge anyway, right? Like, over the past 50 years, we are certain that the ice sheet has been slowly retreating in the north. And the glaciers.
It's very difficult to argue with black and white pictures of glaciers in the Alps or the Himalayas, which now you see coloured pictures taken with digital cameras from exactly the same position.
Oh, yes.
And there is no ice there.
Yeah, I've seen them.
It's very hard, therefore, to argue with that something clearly has happened. Some change has occurred. But that doesn't really inform us much beyond that, and so that's the problem.
So, with regards to the media fallout, so to speak, from this, the UN, I love that the IPCC, to give them some credit, have said, not all hope is lost. There are steps that we can take. Your policymakers, good luck with that, basically. And the UN has thrown its hand up and gone, ah! Red flags everywhere. We've got this enormous red alert, code red for humanity. We need to do this enormous thing. So the question is, what do we expect that these policymakers are going to effectively mandate down from on high? Noting that most of them, if not all of them, are not scientists themselves. They don't know anything. They just got this report. They're not literate enough to even understand the basic level of scientific.
I think that's fairly common knowledge, isn't it? They're all advocating the decarbonisation of the economy.
So we have 2 things, and then I find it funny because I saw we've got Yaron Brook turned up on GB News the other day to talk about how there was some woman on there who said, we need to do this, that, and the other regards to climate, and he said, we need to. He said it in his Elmer Fudd voice, but he said, we need to. There's no way we can get Africa rich without fossil fuels, essentially, and that's why China is on the rise. It's because of fossil fuels. So it's we're in this kind of weird period, as they say, between which renewables are not viable to run an entire economy off compared to fossil fuels. And what?
We have the technology, though. Nuclear is just sat there.
Yes. I mean, nuclear aside, because of course they won't touch that.
No one will touch it. Just it's there. We have the technology now to make nuclear virtually clean, and it's they're just still sat there, just oh no, don't use that.
Well, what is it?
All right, but we are agreed that we'll keep all we'll have the national deposit, the national nuclear dump in Wales, right? Are we agreed?
Well, I'm trying to think what
it's underneath stone.
I'm trying to think what the name of the nuclear, because basically everyone thinks plutonium, thorium. That's the one. Like,
thorium because zero waste nuclear plants.
Essentially zero waste nuclear plants. It's also like highly stable. It doesn't, you have whereas in a plutonium one, it's sort of active all of the time. You have to put thorium in very particular conditions, at which point it starts generating energy.
Okay, and this thorium, how common is it on planet Earth?
It's hugely common. It's everywhere.
Yeah, thorium's abundant.
It's really, really...
Like hydrogen.
Yeah. Like, it's one of those elements which is really, really... it's common, it's easy to basically prepare it for use in a nuclear factory.
So there's nuclear, right? So once we get nuclear, there's nuclear fission. Obviously, we could talk about fusion, but then to go down the fusion lines, like it's the be all and end all. We'll get there one day. We said we'll get there 20 years ago, but we have another 20 years ago.
If we don't blow up the planet with it,
we're presently building a huge plant in France. It's pretty much the entire international community that is chipping in to build this thing.
There's recently a discovery that has possibly jumped the technology 10 years forward in Britain to do with kind of getting more power in than we get out. No, getting more power out than we get in, sorry.
Yes, but by and large, all these plants that have been used so far are sort of experimental plants.
Yeah.
The first thing that would ever be able to generate anywhere near enough power to actually make something useful of it is what is being produced in France.
Yes.
But again, given that this is all sort of fairly cutting edge and the technology isn't even quite there yet to put in the plant as it is being built, if you know what I mean, it's anyone's guess as to when that thing is ever going to be completed.
The hope is, I would say for many people in my mind, is that once we get nuclear, once we have the nuclear option per se, it either be a better, more efficient form of fission or fusion, is that then we can use it to extract hydrogen, and that means we can get around the whole electric car issue and lithium.
Well, yes, but there are other issues with nuclear that one may also want to consider. Why are we very keen to not allow Iran to have a nuclear program?
Well, you don't want them to generate nuclear weapons, although
yes,
although
we all in a way know that if they've got a nuclear program for nuclear reactors, they are pretty much sort of half the way there. And one of the questions we have to ask ourselves is, if we want to power the world with this thing, how many governments are there out there that we wouldn't really like to have nuclear power plants?
If we go to
that's a fair question. You have to admit.
It's a fair question. It is, but thorium nuclear power plants are actually designed differently and can't be used for nuclear for uranium refinement.
Well, I mean, I shall just have to take your word for it, but I'm a little skeptical about this, because I've got the feeling if it really was the silver bullet that will solve everything, we may have already heard about this a few years ago.
I think, though, another thing, though, talking about renewables again, is that we need to just give up with wind power. It's not a feasible option. It's a good option if you're a farmer on a hill in the middle of nowhere. Otherwise, it's not a good option for a national grid. It's a supplementary form of power. It'll never be a main form of power, and that this is the issue with wind turbines, and as well as that they become obsolete and break down very quickly. So that's another thing I think we got to consider there. And also, wind turbines are very damaging to wildlife. They throw birds into complete chaos, and they don't exactly do great to the land that they're sat in. Same goes for solar panels. When rain washes on them, they actually release toxins into the soil, and this has caused some sheep to die and stuff like that, apparently. So there's that. Tidal power is a good idea. It's a shame no one's investing in it, but I think
one of the problems is that anything trying to harness the sea is rather a difficult project. I mean, I remember sort of in the days of Gordon Brown, there was a bit of a craze to try and utilize wave energy.
Yeah.
And they even installed a sort of,
snake.
In layman's terms, a big plug on the bottom of the sea in which effectively, so basically the government invested in that. So if there were any engineering solutions to wave power, their cables could effectively connect to that on the seabed. But just about every single device that was floated out into the Atlantic, within a very short time, was smashed to smithereens just by the sheer violence of the Atlantic. So that turned out to be a bit of a red herring. And one of the problems with, putting a massive wall into the sea is not just holding back the water like a dam and then letting it escape and generating electricity, but it's also withstanding the actual ocean when it gets angry. How successfully one could build something like that would actually stand for 100 years, if you know what I mean, is another issue.
Yeah.
It's particularly difficult here, where we have some of the most violent oceans surrounding.
Yes, these are not sedate. These are not sedate waters.
This is why we say tidal, because the Severn Tide is one of the largest in the world. It's a ridiculously high tide.
Yes.
And so this is why we talk about it. But then Why have I suddenly got an image in my mind of Owain surfing the Severn Bore?
Well, he'd be surfing it in a copper-based bathtub on his way to the New World.
In a copper bathtub. Yes.
A copper coracle. Have you ever heard of a coracle?
Yes, I've heard of a coracle.
A coracle?
Yeah, so
a copper coracle.
Yeah, so coracles are native to my little hometown in Carmarthen here, and literally they're like a little kind of thatched basket that you can use as a boat. Which come with a little paddle. I'll have a copper one with a little paddle going up the bore.
I assume there's a reason they didn't catch on.
You know how there are those garden trugs? It's pretty much one of those, just larger, isn't it?
My uncle used to make trugs for a living, you know.
Well, there you go, ladies and gentlemen. Another brilliant segue by the Britisher.
They are... Shut up, man. They are ridiculously...
Hardy.
Trugs? No, they're expensive.
Oh, well, yes, they are very expensive. But the reason people pay that much for them is because they are rather hardy. They are sturdy and long-lasting.
Yes, but it's like, for a medium-sized trug basket, you're looking at over £40, which is kind of insane.
Well, that's just due to the greed of your grandfather or whatever, isn't it?
Uncle. But
uncle.
They did, to be fair, they were like custom-made, handmade trug baskets, so there's that. And you only ever need to buy one.
You mean to say he didn't run a trug-making factory?
No, there was
I was going to say, sorry to be the bore. I was going to bring us back to topic. You can continue, though, if you want to take it to the next level.
Please move on. Yes.
I wanted to say the last things about kind of power generation and stuff like that, and it was going to be that as technological advances, we need to find what will get more ways of generating power. But there's also that option as well in the future to create for carbon scrubbing, for clean coal power plants, which we capture the carbon that is emitted and you put back into the ground. So there's things here. Like I say, the problem is as well, like I said earlier with China, that they're burning they're burning poor quality coal. That is. You're
just dying to tell us about the great quality of Welsh coal, aren't you?
Yeah, well, this is where I'm going, Britisher. I'm saying that Welsh anthracite actually releases very little into the atmosphere.
Well,
because it's so pure.
Anthracite is one of the fuels that is actually allowed in open fires in London, isn't it?
It's allowed, yeah, because it creates very little. Again, it creates very little pollution.
Basically deemed smokeless.
Yep, and so it's the only coal allowed in fires across the UK now. Soon enough.
Well, yes, yeah.
It looks like fireplaces will be banned soon enough.
I mean, not quite. I mean, when it came to what was he called? That hideous minister whom I hate so much, Michael Gove. Yes, he was the one who came up with these ideas and wanted to get rid of fireplaces completely, but he didn't really get his way. So, bagged coal at the moment now can't be sold anymore. But if you have delivery of coal via a coalman who just basically brings it in open bags, and just delivers it into a coal bunker or whatever, that is still perfectly permissible. And I think it's permissible for another 10 years or so.
Yeah,
After that, it's going to switch to coalless coke or anthracite.
Yeah.
Reopen
the mines.
There are still, and I think it's also the same thing with logs, that, when they're talking of bagged coal that has been stopped, it basically means coal that you might buy at a sort of, garage shop or something like that.
Can it be arrived in pots or pans?
Basically,
if they deliver it in any open form, it's still perfectly legal. And what you're going to get is, what is it? Kiln-dried logs. That's already the case now. So that they again produce much less smoke. So it's kiln-dried logs and coke and anthracite that is going to be used in future fireplaces. But the talk by Michael Gove of getting rid of fireplaces completely and whatever, that seems to be knocked on the head.
Thank God.
You can't
Sorry for boring everybody on this, but yes, that's what's been decided.
In winter, my parents still heat the house with the fireplace. We still use we have an open fire and we have a log bin, and we still use them to heat the house. And it's a cheap, actually cleaner way of doing it because we don't have to use the gas or the oil boiler. I think it's something. So it's such a shame that they've done it.
It's completely untargeted. That's what I find ridiculous. So, if they would have done something which would have basically increased sort of the number of metropolitan areas in which you couldn't burn certain types of coal or whatever in fireplaces, I would have, sort of thought, okay, yes, because in these big agglomerations, that's where it will, pollution will build up. It will accumulate because that many people have got, coal burning. But if you're somewhere outside a village in John O'Groats and you've got a coal fire burning, can you please tell me whom you're supposed to be harming? So that's where I just feel it's completely scattergun. It's not targeted to where it actually would be affected.
Have you not heard of the John O'Groats smog, which comes down and...
Well, yes, precisely. Yeah. The fast-moving smog, the 60-mile-an-hour smog of John O'Groats. Yes.
Is it the episode of South Park, which is the day before the day after tomorrow, and they basically they decide that climate change is coming today, and it's climate change is coming today, and it's going to be a nightmare, and everyone goes like, climate change is coming, and they're running away, and it's screaming with dramatic music, and then it cuts to what they're running from, and there's nothing there.
Smug as well. That's
when it comes to that particular film, isn't it the argument that the Gulf Stream stops?
What?
No. So yeah, the no So the what you call it? In Day After Tomorrow, what happens is the jet stream basically like it has an extreme kind of erratic move.
Well, yes, but isn't it supposed to be that the Gulf Stream also stops due to the this salination process or whatever, that highly salty warm water that goes north? If that breaks down, that heat conveyor to the north breaks down and no longer brings warm waters from the Gulf of Mexico into, up along the North American coast and into Britain and the whole way to Murmansk in Russia.
I think there's also an element of, they put pole shift in there as well, which is another feasible thing.
You see, the amusing thing about this is that a few days ago I came across an article. Don't ask me what it was anymore. By now these things all just merge into one great blur. In which one was arguing that, the Gulf Stream was now in danger of pretty much collapsing because it was moving at its slowest for 1,300 years.
How do they know that?
And precisely. The thought of mine was immediately, who was there over a millennium ago to establish how fast the Gulf Stream was moving back then? But it's these sort of things that we're getting, and we're we're getting them presented as sort of absolute fact. And anybody who sort of questions this is basically just sort of seen as a climate change denier or whatever. Whereas I think most people are perfectly reasonable and are willing to kind of go along with it to a certain degree, but at some point they just balk and just go, hang on a moment, how do you know this? And that's where I think that the whole thing, when NSO, common sense is applied, I know this is an alien concept to you, but when that happens, that's when the sort of the whole, all these models and everything just falls apart, because the average person just looks at it and goes, I'm sorry, but what do you mean the slowest since 1,300 years? This is ridiculous. Moving on. I've silenced the conversation again, haven't I?
No. The reason I am being quiet is because I'm lining up our next story, which is that which we move from climate change to coronavirus. Your favourite topics, Britisher?
Oh God, this is the edgy stream brought up for YouTube standard.
Oh, stop it! But Dido Harding, Baroness Dido Harding, who ran Test and Trace, that greatly successful program in this country, is stepping down, right? And they're like, they make this sound incredibly, gracious, I suppose, as opposed to the idea that she completely mismanaged the thing. I was just trying to find out how much she is
named after a Carthaginian queen. I mean, granted that much, at least.
In Civ, she grants you a free harbour per city you settle on the coast.
I'm trying to work out how much she was paid, essentially, for. Like, I know that her previous job was £65,000 bonus, right? Like, on top of everything else, and whilst that doesn't sound like a great deal in terms of this, but you have to remember these are public persons, so it's all public money that's getting.
Do they ever work full time?
And do they ever work full time? Exactly. So she became the head of NHS improvement in October 2017 before heading up to Test and Trace. Test and Trace was just an utter abysmal failure, to the point where even public servants, especially the military, and then in the private sector, people like retail workers, etc., were just being told en masse to delete this app, not just because it was dangerous to yourself in terms of like your own data being leaked, but also because there was no way to realistically kind of understand who had come in contact with who, and it was like even if someone had been in the same same proximity as you within like 200 feet or whatever.
Well, I think there were sort of practical things that came to the fore where people might have been within close proximity to each other, but they were in separate flats.
Yeah.
So they might have been, in close proximity insofar that they were both leaning against the same wall that was separating the two flats. But nonetheless, they obviously never came in contact with each other.
Anyway, it cost £22 billion. Utter waste of time. But I think it is also an interesting experiment, which we will see the lessons from reapplied if it ever comes to geo-tracking the population via other means anyway. It's one of the reasons why I have very little confidence in, it's why...
In all fairness, there is something heartening about the fact that the state is struggling to track the population.
In some regard, no. It's only been a failure in terms of its ability to reduce coronavirus levels, as if any layperson couldn't tell you that already. But in terms of geo-targeting and geo-tracking, of course it was a success. They were able to identify that people were in certain areas. It's one of the reasons why I find the idea of the vaccine is injecting a microchip into you seems to me to be farcical, is because you're already willingly carrying around a device in your pocket that tells them everything about where you're going and where you want to go. And if they put the stakes correctly, if they claim it's for a climate emergency, if they claim it's for a pandemic that is clearly not a pandemic.
It's strange that you should mention that, because on the week that was, I finished with a nice little piece about Apple launching a scheme, at first only in the United States, which would allow it to scan, client side, because you know about the iCloud, that people can store stuff in the cloud.
Yeah.
And their proclaimed aim is to prevent the spread of child abuse imagery.
I seem to recall something about this. Do tell.
So they are basically saying, in order to prevent child abuse imagery from being uploaded into their cloud, they wish to be able to scan these images, not once they've been uploaded and they're on their cloud, so they're on their system. No, they wish to be able to scan them while they are on your device, before they get uploaded.
Well, the way it works,
and
the way
this has led to all sorts of warnings going off by all sorts of civil liberties groups saying, "Hang on a moment, you are actually arguing that you want to be able to scan, to launch a scan on the device of an individual."
So the reason it happens on the device, or so we're told. Okay, now, I don't agree with this in principle anyway. But the way it works is when you go to sync your device files with the iCloud, those files get scanned, converted into a hash, which is not a which is not an image. It's I can't remember how many.
Yeah, it's effectively a code.
So it's a long
to the various
code,
pixels. Yes,
and it's also encrypted, so it can't be. You cannot get the original image back from it, and then that is compared to a database, or added to a database of like known child abuse images, etc. Hashes of that database, rather, because they're not going to actually store child porn to compare it to, and various presumably law enforcement databases, and if it matches, then you get flagged and they go and investigate further. But I don't think it's not that it's not doing what TikTok was doing, for instance, which is literally taking a screenshot of your gallery every 30 seconds that you had the app open, and of your clipboard, and sending that to a server in China. It's not quite the same.
But the reason I was reminded of that is because you were sort of saying, "Oh well, if it's for the sake of a climate emergency,"
yeah,
and I sort of thought, "Well, yes, it's for the sake of child protection." So they find these kind of overarching high priority causes, and then like that they basically have got their spearhead with which they can then enter into these things. I mean, with this whole thing with the Apple system, it has been mentioned that China, of course, also had this so-called green dam. I'm not sure if they still got it, but they introduced it something like 10 years ago or something like that. And I think every device had to have some software installed in order to allow for that. And that then had the Chinese state scanning pretty much every device. And again, it was pornography and things like that were being checked. But, soon enough, analysts worked out that it was actually scanning a hell of a lot more on the machine. So once you allow the Trojan horse in, well, then I'm sorry, then it's there. So it's perhaps not the wisest thing to allow these things in the first place.
I would agree with that, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
It's
but I don't understand why like say the US would ban Huawei and then not ban TikTok.
They got away with banning Huawei. I mean, I know we did it to some extent over here. Huawei is no longer responsible for our 5G towers, etc. However, TikTok was one of those weird things where, because Trump wanted it gone, the system resisted him. Or they saw it as too much of an expression of state power, because, of course, the way he tried to get rid of it was essentially they had to create a US branch and sell it to them, right? So for essentially, it would have been Facebook or someone who purchased it.
Microsoft bought it, I believe,
or Microsoft, but I don't think it actually went through. I don't think they
when
actually.
When it comes to Huawei, there might actually soon be some development there.
Go on.
Because do you remember there's the Chinese CEO who isn't she the daughter of the founder of something like that, who has been arrested in Canada, and the Americans want her extradited. And this seems to have become a sort of a bit of a sort of an arm wrestling contest between the USA and China. That China wants to prevent at all costs the Canadians extraditing the Huawei CEO to the US. And I think those hearings are slowly coming to a close. So there may well be some news in that, we all know at times these legal things can move almost glacially. But yes, apparently it's coming to a head. So there might be interesting news emerging there at some point. Because, yes, Huawei are a huge issue all around the planet. And the CEO has been stuck in Canada now for some time. It might be a year or two, I think. And still there is this wrestling match going on as to whether she should be extradited to the USA. And you can imagine the US would more than likely have quite a few sort of, intelligence-related questions to ask of someone who's been running Huawei.
Just a few.
So it's one of those things where it's just a question of, watch this space.
Okay.
Sorry, I've done it again.
No.
It's a talent of mine.
It is quite late, but it is horrendous. Someone's just put. I was on my roof the other day, adjusting the TV aerial, when my phone escaped
as you do
out of my pocket and threw itself off of the roof to the tarmac below. Now that was suspicious. Our phones are working against us in more ways than one. The physical, the physical bodies of the phone.
See, this is the thing with gravity, and I think it's perhaps time that a movement be started online. Of given that we've got all sorts of movements about people declaring themselves, non-binary or different sexes or whatever, it may be necessary that perhaps Titania McGrath could lead this one. Of basically a movement that doesn't accept gravity, and like that, mobile phones would not fall down and smash themselves.
Well,
are you know that saying the anti-gravers?
Yeah, why not?
You know that gravity isn't technically real, right?
Oh, no, there you go. See, now it's
what's this quantum?
It's not quantum. It's just relativity, right? It's just.
That's if relativity is correct.
So, as in relativity says that gravity doesn't technically exist. So. It's all to do with the way your frame of reference, right? If you're floating in a vacuum with a spaceship around you, you're floating inside the spaceship, and the spaceship moves, then to you it feels like you're falling to the floor, but you're not actually. And quite similarly, there's like a much longer video which goes into it on Veritasium's channel, which is very interesting. But yeah, essentially,
There's one interesting thought, of course, that perhaps in the place where you would expect gravity to be the fiercest, strictly speaking, it wouldn't exist. And that's if you pretty much go to the centre of a planet, because the mass is then all around you. You wouldn't be pulled inward, would you?
Yeah, but the centre of mass is also much smaller than you are, and so you get crushed rather quickly down to that particular.
Oh, I mean,
point.
given that you would be, pretty much dissolved by the time you got there, it's entirely theoretical anyway.
I mean, you could just yes, there are places you cannot go, because we already have the issue of atmospheres. Even if we went through it via the ocean, which would get us much closer. Okay, so
next scare, really, couldn't it? The core of the world is getting hotter.
I mean, I've watched Journey to the Centre of the Earth.
It's man's fault.
Look,
it's all this underfloor heating.
there's only one way which we can save the dinosaurs which live underground, and that's if you all switch off your televisions, and put your feet up at home, and we have a lockdown for the centre of the Earth. I've seen Journey to the Centre of the Earth. I know what's down there. That's enough evidence for me.
Yeah, but which version of the Journey
The
to the Centre
original.
of the Earth?
The original.
I've seen both. Doesn't one of them have?
There are three, actually.
Brendan Fraser?
Yeah, the latest remake, which was poorly done, is.
You can't knock your boy Brendan Fraser.
Yeah, but
so are we talking Ray Harryhausen here?
That's the one I've seen. I've seen them both, but it's the OG one. Anyway,
before we even mention Ben-Hur.
I have watched Ben-Hur, and you can stop giving me jip about it.
There was a remake.
I watched the original 4-hour version. Yes.
Well, it's not the original; it's a remake.
Okay,
the original is actually a silent black and white movie.
Fine.
With films, bro, we're coming into a horrible age of remakes. Can you imagine when they have to remake, like, I don't know, Harry Potter or something like that?
Oh, for goodness sake, no.
It's gonna happen, though. You know it.
It's going to happen. Yes. I mean, then again,
and Star Wars.
Something needs to change first, because of course now Harry Potter is believed to be written by one of the most evil women alive.
Well, of course, it won't be.
It would be difficult to remake Harry Potter right now, even if the dollars would be sweet.
It wouldn't be hard remade, you see. It would be soft remade, as in, like, they've got these sequels coming out and obviously J.K. Rowling retcons loads as well. Like, there'll be an overtly gay
Grindelwald
and I nearly called him Gandalf then. Grindelwald and Dumbledore had a vibrant sexual gay relationship off camera, that sort of thing.
I'm glad that I have no idea who Grindelwald is.
No, I haven't actually seen it, but I remember the story. But you think of these things, it'll be eroded away, that there were like all these little things that were going around in the background that aren't mentioned in the books, that aren't mentioned in the films, but that, completely destroys some characters.
I just worked out, is that how it's pronounced? Grindelwald?
Yes. Why?
Oh, it's just because, the place name is actually called Grindelwald.
So...
Grindelwald is a stretch.
If anyone so I got this idea, of what we discuss, of what I mentioned there, from a recent Razor Fist rant discussing the end of comic book movies, because we're coming to the end of that paradigm in filmmaking. I think.
Sorry, this is the end of what movies?
So how like noir westerns and all these go through their cycles and they eventually peter out.
Yeah.
We are coming to the end of superhero movies.
Oh, thank God. Yes.
But what will replace it? And what happens generally in between times? Repeating myself, Tanya. Is that remakes get done? Lots and lots of bad remakes. So we're gonna be going through a period of complete and utter kind of creative lack. So we're going to be getting things like, and I imagine this will probably end up with even a Shrek remake, or
we are going to get that. I thought we were already at a complete and utter state of non-creativity.
Well, we are, but it's going to get a lot worse.
And this is according to Razorfist.
Well, this is a Razor Fist rant he did, yes. He did that, but I think that the evidence for the fall of comic movies is everywhere right now.
Yes.
And the problem is there is no new genre coming through to replace it.
I mean, I need to ask this because, I have no idea what Razorfist is up to because I have been blocked by Razorfist. I have no idea why.
Blocked by Razorfist?
Yes, precisely. I have no idea. It's not because of any communication I would have had with him or whatever. I just suddenly, I realised, hang on, I'm blocked by Razorfist.
Because you're an incredibly hateful person, Britisher.
Oh, it must be that. Yes, it must be all those hateful
things I think I've ever heard. Like the fact that he's aware of you and then blocks you.
The fact that I've sort of led all these hateful attacks on him. That must be it. No, I honestly have no idea what happened there. But there you go.
But I think one of the funnest things to do right now, anyway, back to regarding my point, is trying to predict what the next genre will be.
Well, maybe it would be a good thing if for a while we don't really have the sort of, totally dominant genre. Because like that, you would get to the point where they could just start making films again.
Well, what you
here's an interesting story.
Well, what you fail to realise, British, is that one dominant genre comes out of a great film that spurs the imagination of many people. So hopefully it'll be something good.
I actually think it'll be something really melodramatic. I don't know. It could be a neo-noir, and then everyone will hate it. Everyone who likes noir will hate it.
Cyberpunk might come. I'm still waiting for sci-fi to make a return.
I would like to remind you all of what I think the cause for this particular genre is in the first place. It is the fact that Hollywood is determined to try and hold on to its crown as global cinema. So it must be able to make stuff that is watched by Europe, North America, India, and China.
I know what it's going to be.
And superheroes have been ideal in that regard, because you don't need any backstory, you just have people in strange costumes punching each other, and some of the good guys and some of the bad guys.
With the kids we have these days, it's going to be a manga genre.
Oh, you reckon anime is going to make the big comeback?
It's going to be Japanese manga converted into Western cinema.
Well, Western animation has been coming up, but I think that it's primarily in television. Rather than
as in it's going to be like what's that film, the one with the kind of half CGI Robo Kid with the guy who plays Dr. Schultz,
the half CGI Robo Kid.
Yeah, with Christoph Waltz playing a doctor in it. That's a manga converted into a kind of
Hugo.
I think
Hugo,
was straining things there.
No,
I think when it comes to trying to make anything that is easily digestible for a global audience, it is much more likely to be sort of actioners. Think Die Hard, but think of it more as sort of one of the bad Jean-Claude Van Damme versions.
There were good Jean-Claude Van Damme versions.
Oh, there were one or two decent films he was in. Let's be fair, but there were some real turkeys. So I think sort of that is more the territory we're looking at. I think when it comes to any future replacement of comic book hero films, look to the Expendables. Look to something like that.
No, I think
you can have big explosions. You can have action. So perhaps something going back a little more to the 80s.
You know what chat's suggesting?
The days of Schwarzenegger and Stallone.
You know what chat's suggesting? They're going to remake the Carry On films with a progressive twist.
They've already started remaking They've already started writing a new Carry On.
You all from the bottom of my black little heart.
But Britisher, there's a new Carry On coming. Can't you wait?
Oh dear God, no! Please, not another new Carry On.
Yeah, there's a new Carry On with all your favourite progressive, terrible.
They already did one. Was it in the early '90s or the late '80s? Julian Clary was in it, or what was it? Carry On Columbus, and it was horrible.
Will this Carry On be more like Carrion, spelt Carrion?
Well, it's gonna be full of the most bland comedy possible, and it's because it's going to be so non-offensive. Have you seen the modern comedy? Have you watched BBC comedy these days? Can you sit down and watch that stuff?
Such a thing is oxymoron, isn't it? Oxymoron.
It exists, right? But it's so comedy. It's basically Michael McIntyre on just dialed up to just everywhere. Like his form of comedy, that kind of non-offensive sort of. Oh, look how funny my everyday life is.
Michael McIntyre is funny. It's if you basically give him a stand-up routine to do and he does his thing, he's good.
Yeah, entirely.
It's if you then have the latest quota hire, try to do a version of that because that's the only permissible comedy. Well, that's when it just becomes dire. And it becomes even worse when the joke is how unpolitically correct something is.
I think the saddest thing is to see great comedians who were around in like the late 90s, early 2000s just become complete and utter shells. Like
Gentlemen.
the Al Murrays, the Frankie Boyle.
Yeah, Frankie Boyle. That is pretty disappointing, I must admit, because here is somebody who effectively became famous for being edgy, who is now condemning that very kind of thing, and you just look at it and just go, "I'm sorry, but."
So, the only honest one out of all of them is Ricky Gervais.
And that's why he is the highest paid UK comedian.
It's only a shame that I'm not really a great fan of Ricky Gervais.
Yeah, like he's still doing it. He's still doing things like a Ronak.
Apologies, ladies and gentlemen, whilst my internet connection stabilizes.
Lost NSO.
No, I'm here.
I can see NSO, and I just heard him say, but that was just about it.
I am still here. Yes.
You started roboting a bit there, NSO, but I think we've got you back.
Sort of.
Should we continue if we're still alive?
Yes, we're still alive. Yes.
Yeah. We'll just continue and see how we go. Yes. Rowan Atkinson, I could still imagine doing live comedy. By the way, when you say he wouldn't do, yes, I could. I mean, do you remember the Olympic opening ceremony? He was sensational. He is one of the funniest men in the country. Yes, he's done films and whatever, but I could well imagine him just returning to the stage, and doing like a sort of a Royal Command performance, that kind of thing. Yeah. I could very much see him still doing stuff like that.
What a fantastic segue, Britisher. Straight, the Olympics being mentioned. This is
my gift.
Fantastic. I'm going to mention our 2 super chats which have come in. Sorry to interrupt you there, Owine, and then it will all make sense. So Scowen says, 1,209,820 seconds late. So late, I didn't even get a notification for this stream. Even YouTube is trying to spare you now. YouTube!
Well, if I may just say, of course, in certain parts of North Wales, they would count that backwards, so it wouldn't count.
Yes.
Indeed. He's correct.
In Jedi Knight, Anakin Cringewalker says, can we get the opinion of the guests on if China put males disguised as women in some sports? Liao Mengzhu and Tong Zhenhuan specifically. So, if you don't know about this story, essentially, the runners in a Chinese women's team have been accused of being men. Right? Liao Mengzhu and Tong Zhenhuan were awarded... This is not the current Olympics, actually, I think. This is the... In fact, is it?
It is the current one. Yeah.
It is the current one as well, because I know that this came up a couple of years ago, sort of 2019. I think these names.
Oh yes, I am looking at a photograph here, and dear God, this is Tong and Liao, is it?
Supposedly.
I would say Yang is also rather suspect. Fu, I will believe. There's 4 of them, and they're kind of got sort of arms on each other's shoulders, standing there for the camera shot. But I would say 3 of those look highly suspect. If we're looking at the same photograph, hang on, I will give you the link here of what I'm looking at.
I'm just looking for the. Forgive me. I'm looking for the actual.
Oh, perhaps you can see there what I've just put in the stream chat.
Yes.
If that is what we're looking at, then I would say Tong, Liao, and Yang look highly suspect. I would say Fu, not, but the other 3, I would say serious questions need to be asked there.
I generally think Tong and Liao have Adam's apples. But like Liao's body shape, right, from a kind of that sort of perspective is so straight. It doesn't have the female form to it, so it's just like that's a man.
Forget the body shape. Just look at the faces.
Yeah, I know, but I'm just trying to take away from. I'm trying to talk about what isn't the obvious, and try to look for all the other hints for a male versus feminine body. You know. And that's also there's literally Lau literally has armpit hair. I'm not like, you know.
The masculine characteristics of Chinese female Olympic athletes are questioned again, because this was questioned a couple of years ago. So, a number of Chinese female athletes have been accused of having male characteristics, of course, once again, causing public opinion at home about whether or not it's cheating. A few days ago, the women's 49-kilogram weightlifting gold medalist Hu Zihui was accused of being too masculine in appearance and physical characteristics. There is the Chinese women's basketball team as well, which set up a 3-person basketball team for the Olympic Games, was also questioned as to whether or not they had a man disguised as a woman in it. Liao Mengzhu and Tong Zhenhuan, both of China's women's track and field athletes who had been questioned in earlier years, were once again taken out. Referred to as male in shape, appearance, and voice. As early as 2019, Korean media ridiculed these for their lack of distinction between men and women. And even Chinese citizens and netizens, they call them here, expressed doubts. They have become, they're looking at them and they're just going, "You're not women." And it's just obvious that they are.
It is funny, isn't it? It should be the Koreans. It is funny that it's the Koreans that are highlighting this. You know, the country of the most androgynous boy bands known to mankind.
I know that most of these accusations are also coming from the Korean side. Like, there's very few articles from the West. In fact, none that I can see directly here that are, you know, from this year, which are talking about it.
The article that I was looking at is definitely 2019.
Yes, I think I'm on the same one.
But yes, it is one of those where you look at the photograph and you just went, "What?"
Yeah, just it's like everything from the cheekbones to the jawline to the hairstyle.
It's reminiscent of those days when, you know, North Korea would send a gymnast who is obviously 10 years old, but we were told, "Oh, this is a 16-year-old," you know, and we would just go, "What?" Because, you know, given the amount of stresses one puts on the body of these athletes and whatever, it was basically ruled out by the Olympic Committee that it can't keep sending these kids, because there was kind of almost like an arms race going on between certain countries, you know, as to how they could find the most flexible primary school kid and then just, you know, fire it out of a rocket into the gymnastics circle. And therefore they said, "Look, there's a minimum age and you have to abide by that." And of course, what happened was these totalitarian states were just sending clearly what were kids, but were just saying, "No, here's the birth certificate."
Yes, clearly not forged.
We are. Well, no. How would it be forged? This is a totalitarian state. They can just simply issue one, can't they? So you know, when you have these states that are accountable to nobody, they can just simply laugh in your face and present you with someone who's clearly not the age they are, and just say, "No, it is. What do you want to do about it?" And yeah, so we've had various sort of run-ins, I think, with certain states over the years, China clearly being one of them. And yes, when it comes to these particular runners,
I'm loving some of the names.
Totally never.
I'm loving some of the names which are coming out in chat. So we've got Hu Ji Wang, Some Ting Wong, Some Young Guy. I think these are marvellous additions. Yeah, like the fact that it's not even really being questioned. I mean, maybe we should just have a Pope-style test to make sure that they're female or not.
Yes, et bona pendente, as the saying goes. Yes.
Good grief.
What? Oh yeah, okay, I remember now. The Pope test.
Yes,
the Pope
yes.
test.
A quick
the
fondle.
Byzantine birthing chair. Yes.
Yeah.
Lumberg says the UK taxpayer spend on Olympic sports since the last Olympic Games was £230 million, almost £250 million. That's £3.5 million per medal. Is this good value for money? I would say, actually, that yes, it is, because getting people into sports in general and athletes, we're only seeing the people who get selected to go for the Olympic Games here, but that's not including all of the clubs and the kind of prep and the trainers who are given they have their jobs because of this and that sort of thing. And I think that actually supporting Olympic sports is actually a very positive movement, especially for a lot of young people, if I'm honest.
We agree that when it comes to supporting the Olympics, it should also be, how shall we say, supporting the spirit of the Olympics.
The amateurs.
So if you win silver, win the wear the bloody medal.
Oh yes,
I hate
flipping
that boxer. I found that quite disgraceful, actually. How he
sulked.
He sulked and he didn't win the medal. He's like, "Oh, I wanted to win gold." You're not a footballer. It's like, I remember these. England footballers who refused to wear the runners-up medal.
Yeah.
No, that is blatantly disrespectful to the competition itself.
I'm only second best in the entire world.
But the competition.
The how should we say, the worst thing of that thing I felt was that here was the great moment of those other athletes.
Yeah, so, he was making it all about him.
Once in a lifetime moment that they're on the podium.
Yeah.
This is a photograph that they want to stick on their wall. But no, they've now got a sulking child standing next to them.
Yeah,
do you understand what I mean? You just look at it and just go, can you at least, just for the sake of the others...
Yeah, just put a brave face on it. You can have a moan later and get incredibly drunk, but like...
You know who was the first I saw do that? I don't know if any of you are familiar. He was a great footballer, there is absolutely no doubt. Lothar Matthäus.
As if I follow the football.
And he was one of the great German footballers, and I think he was kind of called back into the German team at quite a high age and played some sort of defence position. A lot of people were sort of criticising him, saying, "Oh, he's much too old, he's much too slow." Well, come off it, His national team have called upon him to join them. Is he going to turn them down? No. But I think at one point, I think they made the final but came second or something like that. And all the other players, received the medal around their necks. But not him. He kind of got it around his neck and immediately took it off and kind of, had this scowl on his face. And I remember one of the commentators saying, "Oh, well, this is such a star footballer. To him, nothing but winning is good enough." And I think a lot of this stuff they're doing is a sort of virtue signal, trying to show how determined they are.
Yeah, they're trying to show that, we are winners.
You've got never accept anything other than that, and you just think, well, yes, but I'm sorry, that is actually a much lesser virtue than being a sportsman.
But yes, but the idea
on the other,
but sadly, being a sportsman has no longer existed.
I mean, on the other side of it, you've got Tom Daley in the swimming competition doing the knitting Great British a pullover jumper that he's knitted whilst he's on the sidelines watching the other divers, which I find quite funny.
The ultimate eccentric, yes.
He is quite eccentric, yes.
He is very eccentric. He won his first gold.
Didn't he shout Great British Knitting when he won it as well? That was quite surreal.
Yeah, he's a massive knitting fan.
Yeah, all I can say is he is more than likely the mother in that couple.
I'm certain of it.
Which is funny given the width of his arms,
But,
Yes, I mean, the ultimate built chap, but yes. That's until he starts talking.
Gay Giga Chad
diving,
Knitter.
For diving, you've got to be like kind of have quite long arms, because obviously that will create a less splash in the water because you've got more break on the water and stuff. Yeah.
Stop trying to rationalise this, Owain.
I'm sorry.
For goodness' sake.
And again,
I like.
Perhaps people in the chat know this. I mean, you two fetuses here won't know this. Is it Greg Louganis? Was that the name? That was the American who he got something wrong in his jump and smacked his head on the diving board on the way down.
I remember this because I watched
and
Olympics.
They patched him up. They patched him up. He went back up, jumped, and still won gold.
It was 1988. Yes.
So
it was just he was leagues ahead of everybody else. So it didn't matter whether he was semi-concussed; he would still win.
Do you know what was even? Do you know what was even? That story is even spicier, because 6 months before that Olympic Games, he was diagnosed with HIV. Right.
Oh, that's even better.
So he went, jumped, had a head injury, bled into the pool, but hadn't disclosed that he had HIV in case they didn't let him compete.
Well, and they would have had to drain the pool.
They would have had to drain the pool. And so, thankfully, his blood was fully diluted by the pool water, according to the US CDC, because the chlorine killed all the HIV. So he was...
I still found it was tremendously impressive that basically he didn't just graze it on the way down. He really walloped his skull.
Yes.
And for someone like that to then just go back up and then win the damn thing, yes, that was fairly impressive.
Yeah. But mind, you talk about Olympic moments. Now, someone mentioned Eddie the Eagle. Of course, you got that in the Winter Olympics. But also in the Summer Olympics, you got Eric the Seal. He was I believe a Ugandan swimmer.
Yes.
Who trained in a paddling pool initially, and then trained in the only swimming pool in Uganda.
Amazing.
With a swimming coach who had never swum before.
Oh, even better. Yes.
He qualified in his heat because everyone else had a false start.
Brilliant.
Amazing.
And he got to the semi-final.
The question I like to ask regarding Eddie the Eagle, because there were rule changes after Eddie the Eagle, and in all fairness, I do agree with them. But when it comes to Eddie the Eagle, who won the ski jump that year?
Nobody knows.
That's just it. And it was Marty Niikanen. He was the greatest ski jumper of all times. I mean, he was unbelievable. He was just breaking world records left, right, and centre. What did the press focus on? Oh, there's a guy in thick spectacles from Britain who's completely useless at ski jump. And you just go, hang on a moment. You know, I don't want to take away from the fact that Eddie the Eagle was unbelievably brave, because he was incredibly courageous, because he was clearly operating in something that he didn't quite understand and could easily have broken his neck. But at the same time, it did deflect from the incredible ability of the actual super sportsman who won the competition. And that's why the Olympic Committee then said, look, we have to stop some of these clownsters joining the Olympic Games. I mean, you know, some of my fondest memories of the Olympics are these people, these have-a-go heroes. I mean, there's a famous one I remember, I don't know which Winter Olympics it was. There was an Egyptian, and he was completely useless. I mean, you know, he was making that sort of V shape with his skis as he went down the downhill slope.
Yeah.
Because you know, otherwise he would pick up too much speed and couldn't control anything. Now, if you've ever seen a downhill slope, sort of from profile onwards, you can see they're almost going down a bloody cliff. You know, it's ridiculously steep. So again, a very, very brave guy who went down, fell. The rest of the race finished up. The credits started coming up. Who had won gold, what time, and whatever. Suddenly the credits disappeared, and the commentator went, "Oh, he's on his feet again."
Amazing.
This Egyptian had got up, walked back up to where he had fallen, put his skis back on,
and then cracked on,
and continued. He got to the bottom. He got to the bottom of the slope. He crossed the line.
Yes, that's
and
all
the
that
crowd
matters.
went bananas.
That's
you
all
have
that
never
matters.
seen anything like
That's
it.
the spirit.
That is the
That's
spirit.
the spirit we're looking for.
In a way, that was what one was looking for. But I think what the Olympic Games saw coming was, you know, could you imagine every single C-list celebrity?
Oh, okay, yeah.
Finding a way of getting into. Can you imagine what she called herself? I don't know. It's Katie Price coming down the slope for Uganda or something like that. That's what they saw coming because they saw the power of what this meant to people like Eddie the Eagle and whatever. And they thought, look, we still have to keep this some sort of serious sporting competition, or else it will just be made a complete joke. So yes, I understand why they intervened, but in all fairness, yes, it did away with a lot of those magic moments. I think Eric the Seal was pretty much the last one of such people. And in his case, it only happened, as you say, because everybody else false started. Otherwise, he would have been long out of the competition in the first round.
Yeah. But I don't know. I think I understand what you're saying there, British. I agree with you, to be honest.
I love a good rendition of sort of old Olympic stories before they were. I mean, something is to be said for like the quality of the training and the kind of intensity of it has all gone up. Like, it's not people who are training on their off afternoons, you know, who are doing this.
Yeah,
you know, it's not.
There have been some fantastic stories at the Olympic Games. I mean, wasn't it Klammer? I think he was the cursed one, wasn't he? Franz Klammer was regarded widely as pretty much the greatest downhill skier of his generation, and no matter what happened, something would go wrong. And I remember, I think it was the same Olympics where that Egyptian came down and crossed the line and got all these cheers. And Franz Klammer had, I think he was Austrian, he had completed most of the course. He was clearly ahead on time. He was about to win, and in something like the last corner, one of his skis came detached.
And then, please tell me he Wallace and Gromit style single skied it.
No. I mean the forces on the poor man. You know, I mean, when it comes to downhill skiing, those guys are absolute lunatics.
I think the biggest lunatics in the Winter Olympics are the skeleton.
He went flying into the netting, if you know what I mean. Got up and threw his sticks around, and just his helmet went flying. Everything. He couldn't believe it that yet again it had struck.
Britisher, would you ever do skeleton?
It is somewhat insane. I mean, originally it was called the Cresta Run, wasn't it? Because it only existed in one place. It's in St. Moritz, isn't it? That's where they did the Cresta Run. Bizarrely, of course, once again, invented by the British. It was a bunch of Brits that started the Cresta Run
let's bodyboard down a bobsleigh track.
And you know, at some point then, one sort of decided, well, why don't we make it an Olympic discipline? Which was a bit strange, given that one only performed it in one single place on Earth.
Yeah, but the thing is, they practice it near Bath on a concrete bobsleigh run.
Yes.
The UK.
Yeah, because they don't have a bobsleigh track. Yes.
No, because we don't have snow all year round. But it's mental.
It's clearly one of the most insane. But in all fairness, they had a field which was important. Because I remember a sport once being introduced into the Olympic Games, and it was clearly one of the funniest things of all times in Olympic history, in which there was no field. And they had made a vital miscalculation. It was on the sort of spur of the moment of introducing a lot of these female disciplines. You know, so the men do weightlifting, so now we have to have women weightlifters, that kind of thing.
Okay.
And they also introduced, and this was their fatal mistake, they introduced women's pole vault. And what they had forgot to check is there actually any competition anywhere on planet Earth in which women do pole vaulting? And of course, there wasn't.
Oh dear.
They had to literally create one.
So they had introduced into the Olympic Games a sport for which there was no field, there was no competition.
There were no competitors,
So all the people they got were basically women who had, say, failed to qualify in the long jump for their country.
But wanted to go.
But they wanted to go. So they arrived with a vaulting pole and looked at this rather daunting thing at the other end of the run and went, well, here we go. And the bar was at such ridiculously low height that you felt compelled to say, listen, love, drop the pole, run and jump.
Oh my goodness.
Drop the pole, run and jump. It
was insane. It was so much so that I think it was Juan Antonio Samaranch, one of the greatest names of any Olympic official ever. He was basically the president of the Olympic Committee. I think it was him still, who basically, you know how they do this closing speech where they sort of finish by saying, I call upon the youth of the world to gather in such and such a city in 4 years' time.
Sure.
And in that speech, he effectively acknowledged that mistakes had been made and learned from them. And everybody knew what they were talking about.
Amazing. Well,
you can imagine they were reporting from the track and field.
Yes.
And they would say, oh, well, yes, and now they're sort of halfway through the 10,000 meters and whatever. Oh, and so-and-so Kipchoge is in the lead. Oh, no, we're now going back to the women's pole vault. Everybody realized, no, hang on, that is what everybody wants to see. Because everybody wants to see a bunch of people who, admittedly, are very fit, because they were athletes who had failed in other disciplines. But nonetheless,
not technique
they were people
driven.
who were more comparable. They were more comparable to ordinary people trying to do this highly technical discipline and completely making an arse of themselves. So it became pretty much one of the most popular track and field events.
Here we
but
have...
it was utter incompetence.
It's very popular. Just behind here we have the 300, the 500 meters for the blind. 500 meters for the blind, ladies and gentlemen.
The 500-meter hurdles for the blind. Yes. But no, it really, that one I still remember, and I remember, laugh out loud moments. It was fantastic. And in their defense, since then, women pole vaulters have come along who know how to do it, who clearly have trained, and they're crossing heights that you just find dizzying.
Yeah.
But the first time it was at the Olympics, it just became a running gag. It was fantastic.
Small secret, once upon a time I considered training to become a pole vaulter. There you go.
Oh, well now. So you therefore know who Sergei Bubka is, don't you?
No, of course not. Don't be ridiculous.
Oh, for the love of God. No, seriously not.
Yeah, seriously.
Sergei Bubka, the greatest pole vaulter of all time.
I didn't care about who else had done pole vaulting. I just wanted to.
He was a Ukrainian. He was a Ukrainian, and a bit like that Greg Louganis guy, was leagues ahead of everybody else. And Nike made the mistake of doing a sponsorship deal with him.
Right.
And the sponsorship deal was based on giving him a bonus every single time he broke the world record.
And so you kept breaking it a little bit at a time, is that right?
Ah, yes. You've seen the flaw there, haven't you?
I know.
It was fairly obvious that this man could go 30, 40 centimetres higher than anything, but he would always break it 1 centimetre at a time.
Oh.
Amazing.
And, the height would be 1 centimetre at a time, but you could see as he was clearing the bar that he was way above it every single time. So, yes, it was sort of the ultimate Mickey take by a Ukrainian super athlete.
Perfect grift.
The public loved it, because here was this multinational corporation being milked for all it was worth.
Absolutely. Mighty Balzac says, higher, stronger, faster, Britisher.
That's my motto.
Literally, my last thing would be, Britisher, doesn't it depress you that we can never have a Winter Olympics in the UK? That's depressing to me.
This is why
now you've brought it back to global warming.
Yes, this is why we're doing global warming, is it not? So we have more extreme winters and we can do...
We can have a Winter Olympics.
Yes. It was all part of the plan.
One of the funniest things I've ever heard regarding Winter Olympics is the Danes. You know, this might hurt some regular viewers.
The Danes can't host it either.
But when you think of the Winter Olympics and you think of the cross-country skiing and all this, you know, the Scandinavian flags absolutely predominate.
Oh yes, it's their event.
Except for one country. I believe Denmark has only ever won one Olympic winter medal.
Well, yeah,
I think it's curling.
They're usually too drunk when they arrive, you see, that's the issue.
But it's also because Denmark is extraordinarily flat.
Yes, but again, I mean, you know, when it comes to cross-country skiing, that would be, you know, it would be fairly ideal. But also when it comes to the speed skating, you would think that would help them. But yes, it seems to be that the Danes seem genetically predestined to row and raid, but not necessarily to succeed in peaceful sporting pastimes.
Isn't it the Dutch who are remarkably good at skiing? Not skiing, ice skating.
Well, yes, that's because they invented the sport.
Oh, there we are then.
Yeah, when it came to speed skating and all that, that's entirely a Dutch invention of a sport. And I believe in the winter it is fairly widespread. When it comes to the Danes and sporting prowess, I do have to admit that there was one particular occasion in which I did find them rather charming. And that is, could have been someone in the 90s, the Euros. What had happened was the Yugoslav civil war had kicked off, you know, with the Serbs and the Croatians and the Bosnians and all of them having a go at each other. And so the Yugoslav team effectively got disqualified.
Yeah.
So they were one team short. So they looked at the table and said, well, hang on, the next team in line would have been the Danes. So this was actually a fairly short time before the contest would begin, to the point where none of the Danish players had obviously expected to be called up, and they'd all gone on holiday. So the Danish team manager had to literally try and call them off the beach somewhere in Spain or Greece or, you know, wherever, and say, look, we need to put a team together. Do you want to join us? So these guys arrived wherever this competition was held. I don't remember anymore, but you can imagine them pretty much arriving with, you know, blow-up dolphins under their arm. Going, okay, where's the football match?
It may be Italia 90.
And it was fantastic, because here were all these teams, you know, terribly serious. A bit like the English team this time round. Everybody terribly serious, terribly focused. We won't wear any silver medals. We are here to win. We have a winning mentality. We are total winners. We'll only eat muesli. We'll have calorie-controlled diets. We will, you know, play like automatons. And in come the Danes and say, look, we don't stand a chance anyway. We have had no preparation whatsoever. We'll just play for fun.
So it was Sweden 92. It was in European Championships in Sweden.
And they started smashing everybody to pieces. The very team that didn't care, the very team that was convinced and said so time and again in interviews that they didn't think they stood a chance, won the final against the Germans.
Amazing.
It was unbelievable. It really was one of the most fun events in football ever. Because the one team that didn't take it seriously, I mean, they were photographed drinking out in the evening.
Yeah.
Because they didn't take it serious. What's the point? We haven't even qualified for this competition. And they won it. And it was fabulous. I must say that's pretty much one of the football competitions I've enjoyed most. And that was thanks to the Danes. So They're no good at winter sports, but they have had their moments in football. I must grant them that.
They're also great cyclists.
That's fantastic. I love that.
They're good at cycling. I didn't know that.
They're fantastic in the velodrome.
Ah, okay. Yeah, I shall have to take your word for it. I'm not really much of a great follower of the velodrome. They have a huge amount of disciplines, don't they? I mean, in some cases they're following motorbikes. I mean, it really is a strange. It really is a strange concoction of the sort of things they get up to in the velodrome.
Oh, they have this thing called the Madison, which was very good, which is what they did the other day. It's just kind of like a 150 lap race in the velodrome, which is actually remarkable to watch.
It's a sort of higgledy-piggledy, as in they're all thrown in together, and there's about 30 of them going round. Yeah,
there's only about 5 contestants, but there's about 6 different disciplines.
Oh, well, no, in that case, it's not the one I'm thinking of.
No, as in, like, across the velodrome. Like, there's loads of different events.
No, I mean, I once had the joy as a youngster to be taken to a velodrome once. Long, long ago in a sort of a smoke-filled hall where everybody was there, stuffing sausages or pork pies and pouring beer into themselves and literally smoke-filled. It was just everybody was smoking. I would assume half the riders were smoking when they weren't cycling, if you know what I mean. And it gave the whole thing, when you talked before about film, it gave it almost a film noir atmosphere, if you know what I mean. And you were stuck in the middle of this going, oh Christ, this is something different. But yes, it is a sort of strange cycling culture. Which is why I'm always a bit perplexed at the British suddenly doing so well at it, because when they started winning medals, I think they didn't really even have a track.
They didn't have an official velodrome, a national one anyway.
So it's a strange one, because usually success in sport grows out of the underlying culture that is there. And when it comes to the Brits, we have recently excelled in some sports in which we don't really have much of a grassroots culture compared to other countries.
And especially in this Olympics, we failed in our major discipline, which is meant to be rowing.
Rowing, yes.
Yeah.
I will always...
Mr. Redgrave must be very, very angry.
I will always remember that the 2 Irish twins who had competed in the rowing, and they came back and they'd just won gold, and they're speaking in these very twee sort of rural Irish accents about how their dad wouldn't let them come home unless they got the gold. And that they just, they're looking forward to having some toast when they get back in. That was just the absolute state of this conversation, where, like, it was very pure. It was very pure, but there was no talk about, drive and commitment and that sort of thing. It was just like, Dad wanted us to do it, so we went out and did it. He wouldn't let us come home if we didn't do it, so looking forward to some toast when we get home.
Can we agree, when it comes to the toast-loving Irish rowers, that rowing is an Olympic discipline? Skateboarding isn't.
Yeah, the skateboarding.
Quite good, actually. I enjoy watching it.
The skateboarding thing did seem a little strange.
When it comes to BMX biking, isn't an Olympic discipline. I'm sorry, it just isn't.
Climbing, British show was in it this year as well, which was really fun to watch. You ever watch speed climbing?
I struggle with that, although I can see there being possibly sufficient merit to have as an Olympic discipline. I really am quite sort of a stick in the mud when it comes to some sports, as in what should be at the Olympic Games and what shouldn't.
Chess was once an Olympic sport.
Well, yeah, I mean, but that's ludicrous. I mean, how do you... I believe once there was even cricket at the Olympic Games.
It was, and there was only 2 teams. There was the British, and then there was the British Embassy in France.
Yes, it was the British against the French, and the French were constituted by, of the British Embassy in France. Yes, it's...
I believe cricket now would be quite good, actually, because you have the India and the Pakistani
yes, now
and the West Indies.
It would be more of a competition, yes.
Yeah. did have quite decent teams, actually. New Zealand would probably win the gold in that. I guarantee it.
But, when it comes to some of these things, I think there also is the question of whether certain traditions sort of supersede them being at the Olympics. So when it comes to tennis, if you're a tennis player, if you're an aspiring youngster, 12 years old, you want to win Wimbledon. You don't want to win the Olympics. It's ridiculous. So there is a prize greater than the Olympic gold medal. So why have it at the Olympics? I think the same thing perhaps with cricket, that when it comes to these tests and whatever, they are much more highly regarded than somebody coming home saying, "Oh, we won a gold in cricket at the Olympics."
So, the question, like someone mentioned in sport about football, and I was like, yeah, maybe 11-a-side football shouldn't be there, but I think maybe 5-a-side could be there.
No, I would just say just keep football out completely, because there is the World Cup. Again, no kid is running around the park imagining itself winning the Olympics at football.
Interesting.
Though in their mind, they're scoring a goal in the last minute of the World Cup and beating Brazil.
Yeah, but for South American nations, the Olympic football is actually quite a big deal, because it's
they're just wrong.
It's for young young players. Here's
my ultimate controversy then, in which I just must correct everyone in advance. I am absolutely right, and any objections will be binned instantly.
Okay.
Because I find this entire idea of this sort of international sports jamboree every 4 years, I find it ridiculous. The idea that
must not happen at all.
Every 4 years, a country spends billions in doing this. And I think this is ridiculous, because largely it just ends up with white elephants that never get used.
Yes.
And therefore my solution would simply be, the Greeks invented it.
Shoving Greece.
So every 4 years it is held in Athens, and the youth of the world gathers in Athens, and that is where the Olympic Games take place. And if then new sports come along and they need new venues, then it's not the Greeks, but pretty much sort of the international sporting community that pays in order to have a new whatever drome it is they need. And that just gets added to the existing facilities. Like that, you're not building an Olympic park every 4 years.
So, I again, in one sense, I do agree, but there's the Olympic Committee, to be devil's advocate here, Britisher, has addressed this concern, and now they are only awarding it to countries that already have the facilities in place.
Yes, but the Olympic Committee are on the make. The Olympic Committee are on the make.
On the make.
I remember years ago, I sort of said, if there is one thing I would like to be one day, it is a member of the International Olympic Committee. Because you effectively get ferried from 5-star hotel to 5-star hotel around the entire world, with cities bending over for you, trying to convince you to please, please, please give them your vote to be the next Olympic venue. Whereas, of course, if we all simply agree this happens in Athens and that's where it happens, then all that luxury lifestyle disappears.
But also, we don't want to do that anyway, because then we don't want a resurgent Greece, surely.
I'm going to say I have a lot of nostalgia for London 2012. I think 2012 was a great year. And
well, yes, but I think that's where you're mistaken, because you see, my follow-up to this is quite simple. Just as the Greeks should have the Olympic Games every 4 years, we should also save the same amount of money at football and simply award it to the nation that invented the damn sport.
So all World Cups are at us, all Euros are at us.
And all World Cups are in England. That's it.
Euros maybe could be given to the Germans or something.
Possibly.
Gentlemen, if you're the Brazilians, can you really imagine anything better than playing at Wembley? Seriously,
they all live here anyway.
It has huge cachet. And it is by far and away the most followed league anywhere on planet Earth. So yes, to have it where it started, to have it run by not the Brazilian, not the French, not the Italian football associations, but no, by the Football Association, the one that doesn't have a national moniker ahead of it, because when they started playing and using the term, it was only played in one part of the world, so they never needed a designation of it being the English Football Association.
Gentlemen.
Yes.
Unfortunately, I'm going to bring us towards an end here. Hagnar the Viking has turned up, purchased himself a membership. Please enjoy your new emotes. Thank you for that, Hagnar. Then
before you read his message, has it anything to do with the Germans?
One does, yes. He's donated $100. Thank you ever so much, and says, "Can't stay in chat, but Germania delenda est." And then donated a further $20. Again, thank you very much, and says, "I would rather have BMX in the Olympics than allow women there." Just in general.
You see, I thought he was going in the German direction rather than women.
Oh, just not allowing Germans in the Olympics at all. Quite possibly. But
yes, I think we pretty much have to title him Hagnar the Elder by now, don't we?
Just Hagnar the...
Because Germania delenda est. I mean, it's very much a Cato the Elder line that he has slightly amended.
Just a little bit, yes. Unfortunately, I am being called away, but I will... so I'm going to have to end the stream here. But thank you very much to everyone who has turned up and watched. I'm sorry that we had 2 or 3 weeks off, but we should be continuing. I'm also looking forward to trying to get a more regular stream going later in the week as well. A couple of different topics for those, and I hope that you'll all come along and enjoy the ones of those that you're interested in. Thank you very much to my guests for being on the stream this evening. Thank you very much to Owine.
Thank you very much for having me, Mr. NSO.
And thank you ever so much again for redesigning this very cozy background for the stream.
Mm-hmm. And I also have a little splash screen for you to use eventually, but yes.
Oh, beautiful. And thank you to the Britisher.
Splash screen. Now really I am getting worried.
And thank you to the Britisher, who is long-suffering companion.
An honour and a privilege as ever.
Perfect. So, thank you to everyone. Thank you to all the regulars. Thank you to anyone who's new. I hope you enjoyed the show, and we'll see you again next week. Take care, everyone. Goodbye.